Androids are people too. Votes for androids. We love our machines. Even while buried in the rubble, every bone in his body shattered, his nose, throat, and lungs burning from the explosion. Senator Graves managed to grunt at such an absurd idea. They were so foolish, loving programs inside hard metal shells. The flyers from the android sympathizers had burst through the air and came fluttering down like feathers, scattering amongst his fellow fallen brethren and opposers. Graves had managed to survive, somehow. Despite the miracle, Graves felt the small flicker of optimism burn away as soon as he realized his predicament. He couldn't move. His flesh had burned so terribly he couldn't feel any sensation of touch or pain. He was trapped beneath the rubble of the damaged building, fires surrounding him, unlikely to be rescued any time soon. All of this equated to one thing, something he quickly understood. He was going to die. Graves began to surrender to the idea. Dying was as natural as being born, something all humans were destined to do. He just didn't expect the time to come so soon. He let himself go, accepting what had happened, allowing his body to surrender to its own weight, letting gravity hold him down to the broken concrete. He didn't know how long he was there, staring at the lie boldly painted on a charred protest sign, "Androids are people too," before his eyes became heavy and his lungs could no longer pull in the oxygen his dying body so desperately craved. His vision became blurry, and his eyes stung with smoke and fire as he closed them for the last time. The last thing he saw before fading into eternal slumber were the two glowing yellow eyes attached to a broad, strong body, tossing aside the rubble which had encaged him. The glowing eyes found Graves. Far away, Graves thought he could hear a voice. "Remain calm." He let go. None of it mattered now. Under the glowing eyes of the stranger, Graves surrendered to the fate of all humanity.
Need a little extra help around the house? What about those nasty jobs no one wants to do? Are you missing a loved one? Do you just want someone to keep you company? Andrew's Androids has the answer for you. Unlike us, our androids require no food and no water. All they require is a recharging of their batteries through solar exposure and the occasional maintenance checkup to keep them in tip-top shape, ready to serve you whatever your needs may be. Best of all, we can program each one with their own unique personality and memories. If the loved one has recently passed or they have downloaded their consciousness before their death, we might even be able to transfer their minds directly into these wonderful machines. It will be like they never left you. Andrew's Androids are here for you. Every android has a purpose.
Graves would have gasped if he could. For a moment he struggled with the sensation of not breathing, an instinct he now couldn't satisfy. Regardless of being denied something so unconsciously provided by his own body, he soon found he did not need to breathe. Replicating the process of holding his breath, Graves did not struggle. He began counting to himself, waiting for the lightheadedness, or for his mouth to burst open in protest, taking in as much air his starving lungs could handle. 55, 56. His body did not change. 99, 100. Nothing. He didn't need to breathe. There was a metallic buzz from very nearby once Graves decided to open his eyes. The room was dark, but he didn't struggle to see what surrounded him. His short-sightedness was gone. Looking around as much as he could, Graves thought the room looked unfamiliar and realized he was lying flat on his back, surrounded by foreign machinery which buzzed and moaned as they worked. As he went to turn his head to look around more, he discovered he couldn't. He couldn't move at all. His entire body felt heavy and restrained, trapped until someone would come to his aid. "Hello?" he bellowed. He sounded like himself and found he could easily speak without the need for air. Graves was all the more confused. He had just been in an explosion. How was he able to shout? Why didn't his throat ache at all? "Is someone there? Help me!" The sound of an automatic door whooshed open from the far side of the room, followed by heavy footsteps on a metallic floor grate. Graves could not see the approaching visitor and chose to wait for an explanation. "Senator! Wonderful to see you're awake at last. Looks like the procedure was successful. I knew it would be." Graves felt himself snarl. He knew that voice all too well. That voice belonged to an ambitious, charming businessman. That manufactured charisma covered the true nature of the man it belonged to. A social-climbing, power-hungry, brainwashing psychopath. Adam Andrews. Graves growled to the dark ceiling. Andrews chuckled as he came into Graves' limited field of view. His shoulder-length dark hair poured down the sides of his face as he looked down from above. He spread his arms out wide in his white lab coat. "In the flesh!" Forcing against the restraints, wanting to stand and face Andrews, Graves made his displeasure clear. "What have you done to me?" The facetious grin would boil anyone's blood. "Saved your life? Obviously." Graves again struggled, willed his body to move, even to simply wiggle his toes, but nothing came of it. "Now," Andrews continued, moving over to one of the consoles surrounding the senator, "let's talk about what you can do for me." Graves felt the table upon which he lay slowly begin to change position, raising him up as if he was standing, the restraints holding him tightly. He could now see the door from which Andrews had entered, and 3 others in lab coats behind a large glass window. They were no one he recognized. No one he expected to be there, like family. No. They stood like statues, watching, waiting. They disturbed Graves. "Let me go, Andrews." "Do you have any idea how expensive this procedure is, Senator?" Andrews practically shouted, shocking Graves a little with the volume. "The resources I had to go through just to get you here? I can't just let you go." He had to keep himself under control. That kind of outburst would only give Andrews the edge. He had to be strong. "Why? Why would you do this? What about the others?" Graves felt his emotions surge within him. Rage, fear, sadness, confusion. But his voice, his body did not betray him. Andrews moved to face Graves with the same smirk on his face. Graves would hear him out, refusing to let Andrews sway him with his manufactured charisma. "Barely got you out of there in time, Senator." "What happened?" Graves more demanded than asked, keeping watch on the unmoving 3 outside the room. Andrews' face fell. "You don't remember?" He paused. "Well, I suppose you hit your head pretty hard coming down." "I was dead," Graves insisted. "Yes, you were. But your brain wasn't." Andrews pointed hard to the side of his own head. "Not yet, anyway." Andrews adjusted his weight, making himself more comfortable. Graves tried to take advantage of the moment to move and intimidate Andrews. He was halted by the restraints, and by something else he did not recognize. "What have you done to me?" Andrews laughed. "Saved us a lot of trouble, for one thing. You looked like you were having an awful time with that androids are people too nonsense." Now Graves let out a breathless chuckle. "The founder and CEO of Andrews Androids disagrees with the machine lovers?" Andrews' facade of humor dropped, his tone suddenly all business. "Naturally, Senator." Andrews moved closer, as though he were going to share a great secret with Graves. Androids are tools, after all. Tools for the lazy, tools for the greedy who don't want to pay their fellow humans for an honest day's work. Tools for those who don't like the word no. Tools for anyone and everyone who cannot accept the consequences of what it means to be alive. Graves listened to Andrew's breaths, but couldn't feel them on his skin, like he was supposed to from such a close proximity. Those machine lovers only love those androids because they don't love themselves or their own people. These so-called humans, Andrews made air quotes around the word, are less humane than the machines they claim to love so much. Graves gave himself a moment to absorb the words, the undeniable truth Andrews had just spoken. They're only like that because you've programmed them to be the way they are, Graves gave in a small retort. It was true. These androids could be anything and everything he wanted them to be, and they were. Andrews' mouth formed into a small line. Senator, do you honestly believe you haven't been programmed your entire life? Am I really doing anything different? Graves heard a small mechanical buzz again as he blinked, then tried to remember the last time he had closed his eyes for such a necessity. He tried to shake off what Andrews had just told him, wanting answers to his situation, not the philosophy of a madman. I asked you, he practically whispered, practically threatened, as if he was the one in charge. I asked you, what have you done to me? I already told you, Senator, Andrews answered, completely unfazed. He moved in close again, this time reaching for a panel attached to the table. I saved you. I saved the only part of you that truly matters. Again, he pointed to his own head. Slowly, he moved the same finger back down to the panel, pressing a single button. Graves was freed of the restraints, stumbling to find his equilibrium. His ability to move had returned. Graves only needed to take a few steps to arrive at a conclusion. It wasn't right. He felt wrong in this body. It moved so smoothly. There was no ache in his feet, no pop in his knees, no impending arthritis in his hands. He felt heavier, yet he thought he could jump twice as high as he could before. It was wonderful. It was terrifying. Graves needed only a brief moment to understand. His body was entirely robotic. His human form was beyond repair. Graves studied the bare metallic inner workings of his new hands while he moved his fingers, wanting so desperately to feel the rising panic his mind was channeling to his non-existent nerves. He pressed these unfamiliar hands to his face, feeling nothing. There was only a light clang of metal against metal when the two parts met. All the same, it was him. Andrews had downloaded his mind and consciousness into this machine. You'll get used to it, he assured the senator. You had better. You owe me your life. Graves was awestruck, terrified, bewildered. He was himself, but so far from himself. What do you want? The smile returned again. Right now, Andrews practically shouted, looking beyond Graves into the three beyond the glass window. They moved now and joined the two men inside. They and Andrews surrounded Graves in a diamond shape. I want you to wait. We're making final touches to a skin of your likeness. You'll be able to feel just as you used to in your human body, a perfect recreation of the nervous system. You look just as human as you used to as well. I need you to look human. The three mute androids moved closer. They were much bigger up close, Graves noticed. They were so tall and wide. However, there are a few things I'd like to deprogram about you first. What? Graves shouted. What do you mean? He moved his new heavy body to intimidate Andrews, who confidently stood his ground. Graves felt his vessel pulled back by the other androids. You can't do this to me! Andrews let out a hearty laugh. Senator, I don't think you really understand. You don't have a choice. He moved closer, looking up at Graves's false eyes. I could use some government representation, and I will certainly remove this little prejudice you have against my tools. Andrews tapped the mechanic plate between Graves's new eyes. You'll see my way as if it were your own idea. As a special treat, the awful grin grew wider. I'll even wipe your memory of this little encounter. You'll have nothing but respect and appreciation for the heroism of the androids who saved you. My androids. Andrews guffawed and added, "Oh, and for me too. I love when people appreciate my genius." Graves felt his mechanical shoulders slump. He stopped resisting. Those other people. What happened to them? Andrews merely shrugged. "Dead, I imagine. Why?" "Why only save me? Your androids could have helped them too." Graves looked, or rather received images of Andrews looking perplexed through his visionary sensors. He would never truly look at anything ever again. Because they served their purpose. They were casualties of an attack against the machine lovers to cover the real reason for said attack. Andrew's voice was flat, as if he was a frustrated teacher explaining a simple math problem to a student. Yet again. "I had to get to you." Graves felt a fury rise within him. He grit his metal teeth and lunged for Andrews, only to be tackled by the 3 androids. "You killed them!" Now, Senator. Let's be civilized." "Why?" Graves pleaded once the androids had him pinned to the floor. "You killed all those people. They didn't have to die." Andrews didn't hide his frustration. "Senator, I gave the world a flood of martyrs. Do you know what this will do for my business? A small sacrifice, and my sales will skyrocket." "I always knew you were a monster, Andrews." "No." Andrews crouched down to the floor, keeping his head above Graves. He reached out and opened a small compartment from the crown of the shiny metal skull. A small chip was nestled inside. "I'm a businessman. I've given people exactly what they wanted. Once I'm done with you, you'll be happy to be a tool of mine. Like my company motto says, every android has a purpose. Let me give you a better one." Graves snarled up at the man, his master. "People aren't tools, Andrews." "No, Senator. As I said, androids are tools. People, though? 2 oily, calloused fingers held either side of the chip inside Graves's new head. People are toys."